Yeah, so today on the show we have Asive Dlanjwa. Am I pronouncing the Dlanjwa part correctly, or is that a slip of tongue from my side?
Yeah, it's Dlanjwa.
Dlanjwa.
Yes, that's perfect.
That's a better one.
Yeah.
Yes, and in terms of your accolades, I mean the last that I heard of you, we were in race together.
Yes.
And you were then SRC president
Yes.
of, I believe that was 2017.
2017, 2018.
Yes,
Yeah.
2017, 2018, you were the SRC president at
Yes.
the University of the Free State. And then after that, I mean, that's what we're going to get into today. So I'm
Yeah.
excited to hear all of your stories, the things that you've done in the meantime,
Yes.
and the good fight that you're putting up out there, hopefully.
Yes, no. I'm also excited to chat, and hopefully I'll be able to shed some light on some of the stuff that I've done in the past few years.
Awesome.
Yes.
Thanks a lot. And thanks for coming in. So, I mean,
absolute pleasure, man.
in terms of context, how we met, I suppose, was at university.
Yes.
We were in the same residence there, which is like the place that we stayed at.
Yes.
And we actually we stayed on the same floor
Yes.
for like 3 years as well. Yeah.
Same, bro.
But we not often, but we would have debates. I mean, I often tell people that my mind really opened up at varsity in terms of like other people's perspective, and as well as to like different racial backgrounds and that kind of thing. Because I mean, growing up in the Free State, in Bloemfontein, there was very little interaction for me with different kinds of people. And then at varsity, I met people like you who challenged me a lot, right?
Yes,
Because I mean,
yes.
you come from a completely different background. So maybe if you want to talk a bit about your background and where you grew up.
Yes. No, I was born, in fact, in Mthatha in the Eastern Cape. And then I would go on to do my most of my primary school and high school in KZN. And then from KZN I moved, of course, to Bloemfontein. And I think much like you, my exposure and background was mainly to I was around black people in Eastern Cape, of course, black people, Xhosa people, speaking people. In KZN it would be Zulu speaking people, and another race would have been Indian people.
Yeah.
In all of their diversities, Hindus, Muslim, Urdus, and all of that. So I think when I moved to the Free State, and it was particularly also for me at the residence, that I would come to experience and come across a whole new spectrum of really in terms of people, and that was particularly having to interact with white people at that close range, to live with them, as you say. I mean, we lived with them, we ate with them, and yeah. So, and I think for me too, a huge part of how I saw things and just even the world was really changed and even challenged at the residence. So I can absolutely share that sentiment. So yeah, and it was a huge contrast, of course, to my background of where I was coming from, socially, politically, financially. I mean, everywhere, so yeah, I think it's also a huge milestone when I also look back in terms of how far I've come the last few years.
Yeah, because I mean, as you say, at that point, the res, it's like the occupants of the res was split 50-50, but the culture of the res was still very much Afrikaans and.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, I think it was mainly also rooted in the traditions.
Yeah.
The traditions, which eventually, if you like, for lack of a better term, they became institutionalized in the sense that this was the culture of the residents.
Yeah.
So there were cultures that we came with, whether you were Xhosa, Zulu, Afrikaner, English, or whatever. But there was the culture of the residents, and the culture of the residents was based and rooted in Afrikaner culture and traditions. And in fact, even to some white people who were not Afrikaner or had not been exposed to those, I believe it was some level of shock or whatever.
Definitely.
So I think it really was something, but it helped because of course we would go on to push for a more neutral residence in terms of traditions, or traditions that were based on the values and the people that lived there at that time. Of course, it's much more difficult than I said. You will recall.
We had one of our previous guests on, and we also had a conversation around these sort of topics, how difficult it is to.
So it was very difficult, but I think for me personally, if I be selfish for a while, it was good because I began to see aside culture, patterns and traditions of Afrikaner people that I would have never otherwise seen in a neutral space or maybe in a flat if we're living in a flat somewhere. So it really helped. Also me as a leader, because I suppose there's certain consideration and certain things you would need to know and you must be conscious of if you are going to lead people, especially people of diverse backgrounds, and that would come to the fore when, of course, I would eventually become the SRC president of the institution. So that came to because I could understand it that much better. So when we spoke of transformation, and I could get into a room, and there were people, white Afrikaners who felt that they had culture to protect, the traditions to protect, they had a legacy to protect. And I could understand the black people in the room like me who were saying, but this has nothing to do with us. We were never here when this, so it was erected. Number one. Number two, we do not feel represented. This does not speak to us. And in fact, that conversation would culminate in probably one of the biggest conversations in the last 10 years in the institution, which was the removal of the President Steyn statue in front of the main building, which for various reasons had been iconic with the institution. And funny enough, this time, whether we were black or white, it was iconic with the institution. I'm not speaking of what it meant to you, but it was iconic with the institution nonetheless. Much like the red bricks, So when we had that conversation, and of course I had been arguing very vehemently for the removal of the statue, and we had to put and the process that was favored by the rector, which in fact we also favored, was that of conversation. There were two ways we could have removed that statue. Was one, the manner in which it was done in UCT, which, by the way, I must say I absolutely have no problems with. I think it was an iconic also. It was a monumental moment in not just in the struggle for representation, but in the struggle for the transformation of the higher education sector, especially even free education, which is something hopefully I'll be able to touch on, because the struggle for free education, which was in the Fees Must Fall, which was encapsulated in the Fees Must Fall. Fees Must Fall came out of Rhodes Must Fall, which was for the removal of the statue of Cecil Rhodes. And from the removal of the statue, a new conversation and a new modus operandi of activism, which they then would term follies, would lead us to the Fees Must Fall.
You're right. It was a whole new movement.
Yes.
Started.
So and it was there. So for me to be able to participate in that conversation, so that was the first way which Rhodes did it.
What happened to the Rhodes statue? Is it
after a few protests in fallism, the students defaced it and all of that. And they backed the institution, the UCT, into a wall where it was the institution remains shut until the statue is removed. I'm sure some of them had even tried to remove it physically, but it was just not going to happen because, of course, it was a humongous statue.
I don't think you wouldn't even know where to begin.
So, but ultimately, the university was backed into a corner and they had to remove it. They brought in cranes and they removed it. Now, it might as well have been removed by the students physically. Because there was not necessarily a conversation or whatever. Or there was not a process And the nature of processes would be that any and every affected stakeholder would have to come to participate in the conversation, and then ultimately we would reach a logical conclusion. So that was the first option, which was more, some will argue abroad, some will argue revolutionary, some will, whatever. As I say, I really honestly have no problem with it. And in fact, probably would have favored it at some point, and probably still would in the future, depending on the circumstances. Then the second option was that of conversation, was that of a process. Let us follow an engagement process that will eventually bring us to say this. If we remove the statue, it must be, why is the statue being removed? Are we confident that we have taken into account absolutely
all of the voices?
Absolutely, all from every spectrum, from the most extreme spectrum, at least ends of the spectrum. So that is the one that we had favored at that particular point in time in UFS, and that was the one I would have the opportunity to lead, being then the SRC president. And I think I had an edge, and that edge was based on
your experiences that you built up in Armentum.
Yes, absolutely. There's no doubt about that. It was because, I had been in Armentum, which had been a few years before I would arrive there. Had been previously been HF vote, which still had certain symbolisms in there. And all of those things. And I had already been participating in those conversations for the last 2 to 3 years.
Exactly.
So by the time I did in 2018, I really think I had an upper hand. And it would prove crucial, in those conversations. So I think,
because you've been having the conversations at that point for a longer time.
Yes, absolutely. Formally, informally, I had been having those. In fact, at some point, I'd probably been having those every day at TCAN.
At TCAN, I had Orantile on your episode or two ago. And me and him, we used to chat for hours and hours at TCAN, right? So it just felt so natural sitting here and talking. We had to stop ourselves at some point, basically.
So I really think it was huge. It really assisted, and I'm grateful. I'm grateful for it. Of course, this is probably where one would say that if someone is listening who lived, particularly those who were white Afrikaner, who were opposed to the transformation agenda that we had, they would probably feel that I am somewhat. It's ironic that I said that experience helped me for that, for the broader purpose, and the question would be then, why would you have wanted this removed if you believe that this shaped you to be the leader that you think you were? And I think, as I said, it's for selfish reasons that
you think they'd make the argument that the Armentum environment served a good purpose, so why can't that statue serve the same purpose in someone else's life?
No, I think they would say, why would you, if you believe that Armentum and the culture that you were exposed to built you and exposed you to what would prepare you to participate in those conversations of the statue, why were you the same person back then who pushed and advocated that most of those traditions in Armentum be uprooted and they be replaced with those that because those that are more inclusive? Why would you do that if and I think my answer, of course, to that would be, given the opportunity, I would absolutely do that again. As I say, for selfish reasons, I learned from what I believe was an unjust situation. It was still unjust nonetheless. Did I learn? Yes. Was it unjust? Yes. Would it have to carry? Do I believe that injustice, which I perceive it to have been, would I allow that to carry on for the sake of others to be able to glean what I did from the experience? Absolutely not. It does not make sense. So I still would push for it to transform as it has. Of course, we can argue about what was the character of that transformation. Did it work? Did it not work?
In Armentum. That's an interesting. With one of the previous guests, I sort of discussed that, and I told him I'm very sad that I didn't have the insights I have now at that point in my life, because we were trying to defend it too hard, and it was never going to. The true solution would rather have been to look at what's the core of the like what's the value we're trying to transfer
Yes.
with what's represented by this tradition,
Yes.
and then let's tweak that tradition itself in a more inclusive way,
Yes.
or updated modern way,
Yes.
and that still has the core that it's trying to convey in it. And I mean, at that point, I was just
I think it was it still is the disconnect between what we now know, or some of us knew then, some of us you would know later, and so forth. Some of us knew before, some knew before us. It's what we knew and know to be the truth, vis-a-vis to get to really implement that truth. Because, for instance, if you take traditions, you have Yanni, you have a Beatrice, you have an Eddie. They come in their first year. Some of them, you will take a Beatrice, you will tell them, my father lived in the same residence. And in fact, some of these traditions are the same traditions that my father went through. So it's bigger than the values that you are trying to instill at that particular point in time. It's about legacy. It's a legacy question. It's a heritage question. It's a question of ownership. It's a question of identity. So I suppose it would have been a little bit more difficult for some than it would have been for others. For someone who had no affinity to what was happening, including white Afrikaners, they probably would have minded. Whether this goes or stays, really, if we can build something that we can all share, hey, I'm for that. But for someone else who had, a more deeper level of affinity to what was happening, it would have been difficult. Because I think at one point I realized, I looked at some of the guys and we were having the conversations, and I thought, you take this specific person from the time they were born, they are born in a white Afrikaner family, staunch Afrikaner family, with other families absolutely racist, some of them with racial undertones. And probably the sad things with racial undertones is that they have nothing to do with saying this race is bad or this race is good. It's really how they relate to other races. So they come from there, they're born in that family, they grow up in that family, not by their own choice or whatever. They go to a school, an Afrikaner school, from a primary school to another Uru school, and 19, 18 years later, they get to varsity. And they meet an Asive, they meet an Oradile. Who probably, based on experience or whatever, might have been a little bit more conscious of what was happening than they are. So you're going to have a difficult conversation. And then I realized it was going to be difficult because they only know that which they profess to be the truth.
Exactly.
Yes.
That's what we
yes.
And you view that as a fact. Because you have no reason to doubt it.
Yes.
It's what you've been taught your entire life by everyone you trust.
Absolutely.
And that's why, like, that's your truth. Like, I realized this in like a small little example of this, and it's much more superficial. But so when I eat some fruits, I don't peel them. And to me, I never knew it was an option to, like, I didn't know there were families that peeled them. And I once went over to a friend's place and I asked him, can I get a mango? And he gave me a mango and I bit into it like an apple. And he looks at me and he's like, are you crazy? You should peel that. I'm like, no, you don't peel mangoes. And that was my truth for the longest time. And why would I doubt that?
So when you get exposed to an alternative truth, especially in the manner in which it came, because I remember at one point it was a very turbulent time.
It was during the Shimla Park things as well while you were there, wasn't
it? I was there. But even before that, I remember I called together a meeting of just black members of the residents, and I think it was my first year, second year, whatever. And so these guys had been complaining and had stayed there for 2 or 3 years. And I think it was my first year. Dr. Vilo was still there.
What a legend.
Yes. May his soul rest in peace.
Yes.
And at that time, we meet with the guys to say, I remember I was walking past and they were sitting at the chicken place and they were airing their frustration. And then I said to them, why do we not put an end to it? And they're like, you don't know what you're talking about. We've been here for 3 years, 4 years. This place has always been like this, blah, 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 blah. And I remember called a meeting and we wrote a memorandum of demands and all of that. But because of the frustration that had been built up over the years,
Yeah.
when our approach culminated in what would be a confrontation, in what would be a mess, when there was a house meeting, an emergency
And from the
house
one
meeting.
side, it feels like a disproportionate
Yes,
response, but it's a built up.
yes, because to those guys, it's like, where is
all of
this
a-
coming
all of a
from all of a
sudden, out of
sudden?
nowhere.
Yes, you know.
Yes, okay, oh, yeah.
You understand? So even maybe if under normal circumstances, you'll take a Martin, for instance, who would have been able to sit back and really begin to just break it down and evaluate it for what it is.
Yeah.
And be able to, whether they agree or not, but be able to understand it. But it would have been difficult for majority of those white Afrikaner students who had that affinity to the traditions, because as everything had been going so well, everyone had been participating, and then all of a sudden, people are, they tearing down everything we ever thought to be the truth.
Yeah.
Because if you even look at the identity of the members of the residence, it was built around those traditions. What made you the gentleman on campus? It was those traditions.
Yeah.
What made you think you were the best male residents in the homes? It were those traditions. What gave you the audacity to walk with so much pride on a Monday in those suits? It was those traditions.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying? So that the identity had been engraved or engrafted into those traditions, and so of course it would be difficult. And by the time we were coming, it was frustration over years and years and years and years and years that was saying that no, this place is in fact anti-black and anti-transformative. And then it would be a confrontation. And I think it would have made the conversation now in retrospect much more difficult than it could have been. And of course, I understand the alternative. Some would have said it was those in Dabas and whatever they used to be held. But I think they were too superficial for me, those.
The Indabas.
Yes, they were too superficial. And I would then go on to realize that any true change with adequate depth to actually be able to make it sustainable and make some sort of a tangible difference would have to be based in confrontation.
Yeah.
It had to be in confrontation. I still believe that up until today, in confrontation. I'm not saying in violence, but I'm saying in confrontation. There has to be confrontation, because when that element of confrontation is not there, we all say the things that we believe need to be said for the sake of the conversation at that particular time.
And of keeping relations going.
Relations,
but now if you can take a step back and say this relationship is not what you think it is. Let's acknowledge the gap, and now let's engage again.
Yes, because if you look at everything that came through confrontation, and it were the hardest times, honestly, it were really difficult times. For the students that were there. We look back now and it seems like small, but at that time it was huge for absolutely every student who had been living in Armendam, because suddenly they had to take sides and suddenly they had to make sense of it, and it were confrontations. I still recall some of the house meetings, and that would take place. So I think the point is, because of that tension and that confrontation, we were able to make the changes that we were. In fact, most of the policy around transforming residences in terms of policies and all of that were based on what had been happening in Armentum. That HRA would use.
I think so.
Yes,
too.
What HRA, it's a fact. Yeah. It's a fact. Our conversation and document that were crafted in serious confrontation would become the basis
for the other residences.
Was it a sacrifice, or was it a price to pay for everyone, for absolutely every member of the residence? Yes, it was. But it paid out. As I say, we can always debate the extent to which it paid out.
Yeah, because we were like, ahead of other raisers by like
absolutely.
a year or two.
Absolutely.
If you had to think like everything, like you would hear, okay, this happened in momentum, and then a year or two later you'd hear the same things are happening in other raisers. What prepared you? So you got to varsity. What gave you this sort of natural? Did you always know your natural like leadership ability and like just your drawnness to the politics side of things, or was this something that you discovered about yourself at this point in time?
I'd always known and dabbled there and there in my in my high school, but from grade 10, 11, I stopped completely. I had no ambitions of participating in anything that I perceived to have been political. That would be grade 10, 11, 12, even by the time I got to varsity. And even when I was there was absolutely no... I did not even join any political organization, of course, which for me would have been obviously SASCO. I did not even join that when I got to campus.
That is true. Yeah. And you also you studied economics.
Yes, I had economics, and I was just with the guys at Res, and I did not participate in anything. And then it was up until that particular point when I remember when I walked past those guys and they'd been disgruntled and what. Then I said, guys, we are going to form some sort of a forum. We went to the small gazelle. In fact, yes, the first meeting I called them immediately. Then I said, gather everyone who's black, all black members of the residents, bring them to the small gazelle, and let's say what are these problems we're going to draw. And then from there, it just... And it was not so much the fact, it was not the subject of politics that I was going into, but it was what needed to be done at that particular point in time.
In the place that you lived in?
Yes.
And was planning to live in for the next 3-4 years?
Yes, and even after that had happened, and I think it went rather successfully, I still was relatively laid back. And then... then I started volunteering and assisting at the SRC. I was not in the SRC back then. And I'd been running my small little organization, working with little children in Haideda. Nothing to do with politics. It was, just working with children, doing sports and giving them fruits after that. And then and then Shimla happened. Shimla happened, yes. And then there, of course, because I'd already been volunteering and assisting the SRC members of that time, particularly the SRC president then, Ndogushanduli, was working in his office. And then, of course, I would be drawn into what was happening and became exposed and participated in the conversation and all of that. Yeah. And then I think it became rather a little bit more gradual after that. And then Fizz Must Fall was also another turning point because I then also participated quite, extensively in, yes. And then I think the rest is history. Yeah, but I don't think it was on campus that I knew.
Yeah, it just reaffirmed something.
Yes, it reaffirmed, and it probably brought me back into the fore because I had not been. I had made a conscious decision that I was leaving politics for my personal reasons, and then I was just going to focus on a school, probably focus on private, and
just go and do your thing.
Yes, and and
be quiet and make your money.
Yes, and that was exactly the plan.
Yeah.
And then it would draw me back because of those events.
Yes.
And even when those events happened, I did not make a decision that, okay, this is what... In fact, I think up until about a year or two ago, I finally had to reconcile myself with the fact that, okay, this is probably what I'm going to do.
This is who I am now.
Yes, yeah. But other than that, I'd always say to myself, no, there's something, this is what needs to be done. I believe I am up to the task. I am going to do this. And that's what I would do. And then, about a year ago, so I had to reconcile myself with the fact that, I'm probably, this is what I am going to be or do for a good part of my life.
What are you currently doing?
I am currently the convener, or if you like, the chairperson of SASCO in the province.
Okay.
Yes, SASCO is the South African Students' Congress. Mm-hmm. So we have branches in all institutions of higher learning, be it universities, colleges, private and public, so across the province. So roughly, I think.
So is SASCA only in the Free State?
No, it's national.
Yeah, but you convey of everyone in
the Free State. Yes, I'm leading them in the Free State.
So you're having the conversations that you had at varsity now on a much
bigger scale at different institutions, because CUT will be a totally different animal compared to the University of the Free State. Moteo TVET College would be absolutely a different beast compared to any university, because it's a college. Maludi TVET College down in will be a completely different story. The challenges that are faced by the students there, let alone the challenge that they're facing in class. There's basically no water in most of the parts. And they don't have student residences as we would for the most part. As I said, for the majority of the students, they rent in back rooms and whatever. Sure. And these are the places that do not have water. There's infrastructure, even resources in the classroom. So the conversation is just much different. Yes, and then we also have the responsibility to also inform. Also, even the national conversation and the national agenda. Yeah. Working with other leaders of other provinces, to make sense of what is happening at a national level, to be able to shape the agenda, even going to the Department of Education at a national level. Our participation in the national structures of SASCO. As provincial leader. So that is where I am, and I suppose that is what more or less the job entails. And working with politicians in the Free State. We've worked very closely, and I've been working very closely with the Premier of the Free State, Sisi and Ombela. Yes, and some politicians in the Free State. That's what I'm currently doing now. And of course also still studying.
Yeah. Is the studying happening on the sideline
as well? Yes, not as good as and as efficient as it should, but yes.
Yes, focus on a few other things. It's nice. It's part of the balance of the whole person, and being busy with this and that. I remember you also cycle. But I don't know whether that, you took, that was quite serious at some point as well, if I remember correctly.
Yes. That was what I did as
to clear your head.
Yes, besides everything else that was work or school related, I cycled. Participated in races and whatever. I did road. In fact, when I was SRC president, I cycled from Bloemfontein to Cape Town to raise funds.
I think
for registration. Yes, do not go too shabby. Raise 407,000. So yes, I was also fortunately able to use that for registrations. For registrations, and to be able to merge that with what I did.
To bring all of your sides and things together. Yes.
So, and then up until beginning of this year, I've taken a break from cycling. So I have probably dedicated most of my time now that I would have dedicated to cycling to playing golf. I've been playing over the years there and there, but I've put in a little bit more time.
Some effort now too.
Yes, and try and drive that handicap down.
We're working on that a bit.
Yes.
And I mean, being in I think Oratile and I touched on that a bit, but being in the political sphere in South Africa, are you your prospect looking for? Are you hopeful for the direction that things are going in? Are you happy with the pace at which things are happening? If you are happy with the direction,
yes.
Just that sort of conversation. Do you feel like change is happening?
If you ask me the same question about 5 years ago, I would have said I'm very discouraged, absolutely not hopeful about where we are going. And the broader body politic. But I'm really encouraged now as we speak. And it's funny because I think as a member of the ANC, which also happens to be the party in government, I think one could even argue that the ANC is imploding currently at this time. I do not think it has faced absolutely many challenges in the past, but I don't think since post-democracy that the ANC has faced the challenges and they threatening its very existence, if I have to be honest.
Yeah.
At the challenge that it's currently facing at the moment. And so then one would argue, but how would you at this time, and even economically speaking, I think we're in probably the worst shape that we've been since the advent of democracy. I'm not saying this with any numbers, but when I look at, of course, I think we've now come to be able to make a norm of what is happening in terms of where we are, in terms of prices, in terms of the cost of living, whatever. It probably seems normal, but I don't think it should be when we look at the poverty levels that we have in South Africa. Relating the current structure of the economy, I personally believe that it's not in a good shape at all to be able to cater for the absolutely marginalized.
The majority of our people.
Yes, the majority, yes.
Yeah.
So one would then say, but how would you then... But I think it's... maybe I'm delusional or optimistic. You'll decide. I think it's the chaos or the storm, before what I believe we are heading to a more a new era that we have never seen. That will probably be better in terms of politics for South African politics than we've seen.
There's a tear happening and there's a bit of chaos, but you think when we settle now, we'll settle on something a bit better.
It's good chaos, yes, because I think I can now with this conversation alone, I think we can speak for hours. But a few things that I can tell you. South African politics have been largely, to the greatest extent you can imagine, have been informed by politics of the ANC.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that. Any other analysis contrary to that would be absolutely ludicrous. What we see in terms of trends and just what the South African politics are, the body politics, they have been informed by the ANC, by the politics of the ANC. From its traditions to its policies, to its failures, to its successes, all of those things. Like for instance, so at one point you had leaders in the ANC that were very largely moral, of academic persuasion. Some of them had been trained in economics and all of that, and and it was very skill based and all of that, and it was
a professional study.
Yes, it was a professional organization, and we ran it professionally. We governed professionally.
Yeah, intellectuals in the right positions.
I'm not saying we governed perfectly, but the right systems were in place.
Yeah.
And then around mid 2000s, or probably around 2006, 7, 8, all the way through, the politics of the ANC began to change, and we now know they had been changing for the worst.
Yeah.
Who was leading? That's up to you.
Do you think it was a puppet state? You don't think the leaders were up?
I don't think it was. I think to say it was a banana republic or puppet state is an exaggeration, because we've seen puppet states, and we would not be here if we had a puppet state. But it changed, and it changed for the worst. How did it change? Patronage and corruption.
Yeah.
It stopped becoming eventful or an event. It became institutionalized.
Yes.
Into how we would say.
You would always see some of that happening.
Yes, we would say in you would be wearing an ANC t-shirt, not the normal voting t-shirt with the face of whoever would be the president at that time. But you would be wearing an ANC golf t-shirt, and like, hey, are you in politics? And you'd probably say yes or no. And whether you said yes or no, the comment after that, this is in the rural areas, for my largely of people who had been, it's changing now. That's another thing that I'm going to speak to that encourages me. but they had been largely illiterate, especially at that time, about 7-10 years back. Illiteracy was rife in rural communities.
Okay.
Now, the comment that they would make would be, do you also want to be loot? Do you also want to steal our money? They assumed that by the virtue of the fact that you are a leader of the ANC in government, you are stealing their money.
Yes.
Whether it had been based on a scenario that had been true, or it had been created or falsified, or whatever, but the bottom line, the public perception was that we were stealing money, or you are going to steal money if you are leader of the ANC in government.
Yes.
So corruption became institutionalized, and it became the way. I have many comrades who would have said, when they spoke of their ambition to lead, it had absolutely nothing to do or with the plight of the marginalized. It had absolutely everything to do with self-gratification and everything else that has to do with that. So, and there was nothing wrong with that. It was not frowned upon when they spoke like that, because this is what had now become the norm.
Yeah.
So that is what happened, and it has been very, very, very difficult for us to turn the ship after that.
It was a very deep rot.
Yes, because you now have members and people who, you see, the problem with corruption is that the cancer of corruption is that it's exactly that. It's cancerous. It moves from one stage to the next, and it attacks other areas. Because what would happen is, if Asive was leading and Asive was perceived to be corrupt and Asive was able to accumulate wealth based, to be honest, if you're in public office, you cannot accumulate the level of wealth that some of our leaders have accumulated. It's impossible.
Yeah, no,
it's just impossible. You cannot be on a salary of 60 grand a month. It's a lot. Puts you in the top 1%.
Yeah.
In the country. But with the 60,
which is a shocking stat as well. I didn't understand the poverty of our country until I had to start doing, because I for my job I do some analysis on like medical aid take up and that sort of thing.
Yes.
And then you're like, I walk in as a first year worker and I'm in the top like 5%
of earners in
South Africa. Like this is not supposed to be the case,
you
right?
See? So, which is another conversation. So who is having the opportunities to be able to get into those jobs?
Yeah.
And, but so what then happens is, this guy is earning 60 grand a month. You can't be driving a Maserati
on 60,000
and a few Range Rovers on 60 grand a month. It's just impossible.
Yeah.
You do the numbers. You're the numbers guy. I'm not. It's just impossible.
Yeah, no, it doesn't.
It does not add up. And there is that guy, and every other guy is doing the same thing. So there's just no way. Now what happens is this: when Asive is driving that Maserati after taking up public office for 2 years, another thing we must speak of. You were poor 2 years ago, absolutely poor. 2 years later, you take up the position and you are driving a Maserati on 60 grand. Actually. It's impossible.
Yeah.
Now we all know what's happening. You're looting the state. Finish and clear. We can speak of technicalities, but you're looting the state and the state resources. Now, when someone else sees that, when Oradile sees that, and who's coming up, who's much more junior in politics than I, the obvious inclination
the role models that's being
is that
created.
I want that.
Yes.
So when they come in, they need to establish what is it that I did and that I do to have been able to accumulate that wealth. And then it becomes a vicious cycle at the expense of the marginalized.
But it's also that thing of seeing your role model. So now someone who's getting into politics looks up to that person, and all they're seeing is this rooting and corruption.
Yes.
So they've got no one they can look up to who's of more moral character.
Yes.
And even if you get in there now as a young junior in politics, now you trying to put up a fight, a good fight, but there's 9 people next to you who's just there to. Yeah, I think it's very easy to just give up hope. Like I'm not gonna kick a system.
That's just bigger than me.
Exactly.
That number 2, what then became to become the culture in the ANC. Those that were of moral standing and uncompromising principles became marginalized, and they were relegated into the periphery. So they were not. I won't say they were not allowed to lead, but they were frustrated such that they would not be able to lead. So you take the Free State, for example. If anything about you suggested ever so slightly that you could have been a man of integrity and of moral upstanding, whatever that is to you, you would be absolutely banished from the politics of the province. You would be thrown on the outskirts, and the only people who would be brought to lead our people, unfortunately, were people whom were trusted that when they will be able to loot the state, they will be able to be as corrupt as possible, they will be able to flout processes, and they are going to be able to further this patronage that had been happening. This is what has happened in the Free State. It's a reality.
Yeah.
You can quote me on that. Now, so that had become the culture in the ANC. Now, what is happening is that now the society is rejecting the ANC, that ANC.
Yeah.
They might not have rejected us to the terribly to a point where, I mean, we lose elections.
Exactly.
Yes.
They haven't shifted the election vote yet.
But we're not doing as we are depleting and depleting and depleting. The loss of metros, key metros in the country, the loss of the Tshwane Metro in the 2016 government, in fact, it was on the 2016, at least the majority of them in the 2016 local government elections, the loss of the Tshwane Metro, loss of the Joburg Metro, loss of Nelson Mandela. Of course, the Cape Town had already been lost. Those are probably 4 of the biggest metros in the country, and they'd been lost to the opposition.
If you look at where from an economic perspective, the amount of money that lies within
within those regions,
it's 80% of South Africa's
you see,
money.
That's 80% of the coffers of the country.
Yeah.
Or at least of the business of the country. Now, that should have been telling to say that the people are sending a warning. If they had rejected, in fact, maybe let me correct my answer. The people are not rejecting the ANC because you can't reject something and still have it. If they had rejected the ANC would have been voted out of power. But the people sent a message to the ANC that this ANC is not the ANC that we identify with.
Yeah.
And as such, they punished. In fact, research showed us that in 2016, we lost not so much because of people that voted for the opposition, which yes, of course they did, but because of the amount of people that abstained, traditional voters of the ANC that abstained.
Yeah.
And that's how we lost.
That's what you said. Like they're not so shunned by the ANC that they want to shift to the DA or whatever because they don't agree with the DA anymore.
Not they agree with the politics of the EFF. They don't. Our voters, the majority of our members and voters, don't agree with the politics of the EFF. It's a fact.
Yeah. And so you rather just instead of not just throwing a vote to one of them, they
would rather just abstain.
Yes, you'd rather just abstain.
So that happened. And so we are now at a point where, and this is where the implosion or the perceived implosion can be seen or identified, is that this former ANC of the last 10 to 15 years that has been rooted in corruption, and that this ANC or that is trying to favor the interest of the people or trying to favor the view of the people. What do ordinary citizens of South Africa think of the ANC? It's that fight. It's that fight that is currently happening in the ANC now, at least from where I'm sitting. Now, I am not as oblivious and as ignorant as to think that the people that are leading the fight against corruption in the ANC are not in any ways compromised themselves. Because they have been members of the ANC at that particular time, they are also compromised. It's a reality that we must acknowledge. Another reality that we must acknowledge is that, unfortunately, as with every state in the world, I'm most confident of this, there are always powers that are not necessarily at the fore that inform policy and directions
Yes.
of nations.
These are companies.
Companies, private individuals,
exactly.
and private companies.
Yeah.
You really, every country or whoever's leading at that time, they really just have to choose. It's said we have to say this, but they have to choose who are they going to surrender
Power to.
their sovereignty to.
And they don't choose, they put it up for auction.
For auction, absolutely. I think you put it much better. They put it up for auction.
Yeah.
You see? So, because then someone will say, no, the fight against corruption and the perceived fight against perceived corruption in the ANC, or between the fight between good and evil, so to speak, in the ANC, that that these people that are sponsoring the fight of the good are in fact people that are corrupt. And I would never be as ignorant as to say that's a lie.
Yes.
I definitely believe that. The extent to which I will never know, I don't think any of us will ever know.
But the intentions of the people on the good side, as you call them,
yeah,
that's what makes it different from the people on...
That's what makes a difference, but also what makes a difference for me personally, and this now can be ideologically be argued differently. For me, the difference is the product that each are selling, how well does it rate with our clients, which are the citizens. So what is the perception?
It's a capitalist system,
yes,
this whole thing.
Yes. What is the perception of this product? The majority of the citizens, how do they perceive this product? Because my interest as a member of the ANC is biased to the ANC remaining in government.
Yes.
If it means strategically we are going to have to be seen to be ideologically incoherent, and such that you are able to retain state power.
Yes.
I will take that deal.
You'll take that.
Myself personally, as
you play the long game. You don't.
Yes, I will take that deal.
Yeah.
Though I might be perceived to have been ideologically compromised, I will take that deal, because you take the PAC. The PAC broke away from the ANC. During the amalgamation of or at least the establishment of the Freedom Charter. Okay. And their biggest issue from that was that the ANC was saying that South Africa belongs to all who live in it, and that's the first thing that the Pan-Africanist movement disagreed with. That cannot be the truth. Africa belongs to the indigenous people of African people. The Freedom Charter will go on to guide that the wealth of the country must be shared equally by all those who live in the country. As again, the one thing that they did not agree with, that no, it cannot be shared equally amongst whites and black. It must favor black. In fact, preferably that white people must not participate or have a share in the land of the country.
Yeah.
So
I don't know. That's a very interesting
history. So ideologically, nothing could have been clearer than that. Pan-Africanism, was absolutely clear. It could not have been mistaken by anyone, whether from a mile or from up close. Yeah. It was just clear that this is where they stood. And they held to their guns, and they still do up until today. I could be wrong, I stand to be corrected. If the PAC has a seat in parliament, it cannot be more than one.
Yeah.
Can't be more than one. At one point, in fact, they should have been the most obvious alternative to the ANC when the ANC had been banned and the ANC had been going through. The ANC had always faced challenges.
Yes.
At one point, the ANC, it was working from exile, and the majority of the leaders of the PAC were still in the country.
I can't, the stories, whenever I listen to, Desmond Tutu, when I listen to his stories and, talk about the things that he's experienced, and it is, the amount of respect that I have for these people is just
yes.
because, as you say, like operating out of exile
Yes,
and sort of having these underground little
and to try to keep the organization
and to
alive.
keep everything alive. It's like if you could plot the lifeblood of the ANC on a graph, it must have gone close to like dying so many times, and then maybe a word somewhere or something.
Absolutely,
It's insane to imagine that is what kept it going.
So when that was happening, then it should have been relatively easy for the PAC to, but the problem was that ideological stance, and I personally, to be honest with you, and especially for when that stance was now as a member of the ANC and having been educated in the and being indoctrinated in the Freedom Charter.
Yes.
There is nothing in me that would have favored that ideological stance.
But had you been there as a man on the street,
I probably would have.
Yes.
But the point that I'm making is that they should have been. In fact, even the ANC had not pre the drafting of the Freedom Charter and post the drafting of the Freedom Charter, because of the brutality of the apartheid government, the ANC was not as open or as nationalist as they are in their approach. They were not. When they went to 1969 in what would be famously dubbed as the Morogoro Conference, majority of their resolutions were anchored in socialism. And the nature and the execution and the form and the character of that socialism would have and should have favored the black majority of South Africans.
Yeah.
And it would have been at the expense of the white capitalist class.
And I feel like I almost need to interject here because when we hear the word, there's a little experiment or something that, anecdotal experiment they did with people just hearing, like, when you hear the word socialism, people naturally have a knee-jerk reaction.
Yes, they do.
But then I saw this question the other day on one of the websites I like reading on about, and someone asked, like, what's the secret of Nordic countries and like your Switzerland and these countries? How are they so successful? And the number one answer to this question, someone was like, okay, I'm going to say it, but I please want you to read the rest of my answer. It's socialism.
Yes.
And it's like when you apply socialist policies in a manner which is thought through and that is
scientific.
That is scientific and balanced, it's not bad.
Absolutely.
But the problem is people hear it and then they immediately think it's a thing of it's a free for all sort of dog show.
Yes. So at that point in time, the ANC even itself after that, it had to recalibrate.
Okay.
It had to the ANC has always had to recalibrate, by the way.
You don't survive as long as it has survived by
being staunch.
Exactly.
So it's that same argument that I'm raising. That I suppose even with the PAC, it was exactly that hampered them. I've lost my train of thought on that. But what I was speaking to was, what are the things that are making me hopeful moving forward?
Yeah. So
one, of course, it is that. Remembering my thought, it was this thing, this specific fight of the good and evil, and where people are saying, no, there are us who have backed the fight for good against the fight for evil, that we have prostituted our souls to capitalism. Because the ideological inclination and clarity of the side, as led by President Cyril Ramaphosa, is that of a capitalist structure, a capitalist persuasion.
Yeah.
And if I am honest with you, and I believe them, it's true.
Yeah.
It's not that they're speaking of a fact.
Yeah.
But you see, there are so many things that are true. But you can't. Two opposing views can be true at the same time.
Yeah.
they can be true at the same time. I'll give you an example.
The perspective, I think, is
Yes.
the big role player. Yeah.
The argument that is being raised by your so-called radical economic transformation forces, or RET forces, as led by Ace Magashule and every other corrupt individual, as far as I'm concerned, the arguments that they raise are not altogether untrue.
Yes.
Majority of them, out of context, or put everything else aside and look at them as they are truthful.
Remember, they need to be able to sell these ideas to people as
yes.
well. They can't go in there with clear lies.
It's like if I say it's contested, particularly by AfriForum, you would also have your numbers in this as to what is actually the land distribution amongst black and white. AfriForum contests that 76% of the land belongs to, I think, 7% of the population, which is white, and all of that. But let's just use a ratio, just to, let's say
80%.
Yes, let's say 80% of the land is owned by white, and 20% of the land is owned by black. Just as it's not necessarily technically true, that's a reality. Let's imagine that's a reality.
Yeah.
And we will agree that that is wrong. But another reality, an economist will say, so if I say to you, let's start this side, and I say to you,
yes,
let's transfer this land and let's distribute it proportionally.
Let's make it fair.
Let's make it fair.
Yeah.
Tomorrow, let's wake up, because it can be done tomorrow. The ramifications of social will be disastrous.
Yes.
You would know this. But we can wake up tomorrow and go and do it.
Yes.
We really can. If everyone came on board, I mean, you could sit parliament today. It could be done. Let's do it. We can agree it's correct and it's true. We firstly have established that this is a fact and that this is right. And common sense is, if you have children and you've got 3 of them and you probably want to give them food, you're not going to starve the other one and what. So you will understand this. Then if I come this side and I speak to an economist is going to say, if you do that, that country will collapse faster than I can say collapse.
Yes.
In 24 hours, you will not have a country.
Yeah.
Economically speaking.
Yeah.
It's a truth. It's not a lie. It's a truth. It really will happen.
Yes.
But do you see that these are both truths, but it's two opposing things, but they are both true all at the same time?
I think, I'm not sure whether it was Einstein who said, like, the trait of an intelligent mind is being able to entertain 2 ideas without accepting one of them to be. And I mean, in this instance, as you said, like, it's 2. But the thing is, they're not hard contradictory.
Yes.
They're on opposite sides of the political spectrum and the arguments being made, but they're both 100% true.
They're both 100% true.
Yeah.
And so this is also what is happening here. So you just have to choose your side. You have to choose your side based, sometimes it'll be based on you and your higher powers. You just have to choose your side, honestly.
Yeah.
But I personally believe, I will not say this is the view of the ANC, but I personally believe that right now, I'm saying right now because tomorrow it might be a different story, that right now society favors the optics of the good side.
Yeah.
But
that's also the capitalist side.
Unfortunately, it is the capitalist side.
Yeah.
Some know, some don't know. But even those that know, they favor it.
Yes. But opposed to what we had.
It
feels like a massive win.
And because I would hope to one day when I lead the country, I would, unfortunately, with every passing day, it just became a little more elusive of a dream. That I would have hoped that one day when I lead the country, I would lead the country under the banner of the ANC. But unless we surrender currently for now to this side, that might not become a reality from where I'm standing.
Yeah.
The other guys are going to argue with me, and they're going to say, but what type of ANC is this that you want to lead? That will not be an ANC that you'll be leading under. You will be leading under a shadow of the ANC.
It'll be a whole new.
It will not be. That will be a some sort of a capitalist mechanic or whatever, But it will have nothing to do with what the ANC, stood
that
for.
Was there.
Yes, and it's probably a conversation that we want to have. It's a very difficult conversation because once again there are other realities. The other realities are these: the people that own the means, the people that own our minds. Are unfortunately capitalists in terms of media.
I mean that is the system
the
that we
media is not
to,
owned
right?
by some god in the sky. It's not owned by some constitution. The media consists of organizations that are owned by individuals.
Yes.
The individuals that work in the organization are individuals that have personal persuasions.
Yes.
There is absolutely, for me, the most absurd thing I've ever heard of is the concept of objective media. I don't think it's possible. I really do not think it's possible. Because if there's a human involved,
it's thrown out the window immediately.
It can't be. It really cannot be. If today you listen to, or even read some of Jacob Zuma's papers, legally speaking, some of the things you can't argue with. The man is making sense. But it goes back to that issue of two truths being true all at the same time.
Yeah.
So the reality of the fact of the matter is that I often think if one day we woke up, if we had elections today and the EFF won elections tomorrow, unfortunately, even things that might not be true, the majority of the society will then be taught to be true through the media.
Yeah, it's such a powerful tool.
You understand?
We're seeing it now with the whole Palestinian-Israeli thing.
Yes, absolutely.
That was I was spinning for 3 days because I was like, I don't know who's. Because we get a lot of, or in my circles at least, I get a lot of Palestinian sympathy.
Yes.
So that was my view, 100%. But I was like, I'm not sure enough about this to have a hardcore view on this. And then I tried reading up and figuring out what's going on. And now in the end, you're like, okay, well, I mean, my view at the moment is that I don't understand the conversation that's happening in terms of how people are sympathetic with Israel coming in there in the last 100 years and slowly working because these people are, the Palestinians are from what my media has shown me, they're just trying to live there and go on with their lives, and the Israeli people are making it impossible for them.
Absolutely. So,
but it's the media.
But that's not what it's reported. In different circles, as you say, that is not what is reported. In fact, everything me and you know to be true, except for things that have gone to court. And it's only recently now that we've seen everything being taken to court. Before, that's not how it was. But everything me and you know to be the truth on what is happening in politics, in government, and in the ANC. We do not have first-hand experience or heard it first-hand or saw it first-hand. So everything we know to be the truth is what we have been told, what we have read, and what we have watched.
Yeah.
Then you will, in 2018 or 2019, I can't remember. Then the story breaks out that for a good 4 to 5 years or whatever, the Sunday Times had been fabricating stories. The biggest Sunday publication, had been fabricating stories, and there was this particular, and then all you get at the end of it is apologies.
Yes, but
for years, for almost half a decade,
exactly,
you are fabricating stories, and you are reading them to be fact.
Yeah,
and we are changing our minds.
Your worldview.
Your worldview on how we perceive and know the truth to be the truth and the lies to be the lies.
And what you stand for and what you stand against.
You have a Maria Ramos comes, apologizes after a few years. Yes, we did manipulate the rand there and there.
No ways.
That's tantamount to treason. I
Yeah,
mean,
I know.
you can look it up on your phone now. And she apologizes that, I mean, they manipulated the rent.
But who knows? I look it up. Maybe that's another story being planted by someone else. It's all just stories being fed to
You
us.
see, no, but the benefit of that one is that she comes out to apologize herself.
Yes.
Now, my thing is, that's one instant that it came out, that they were caught out.
Yeah.
What happens? We then say, Ramaphosa is doing nonsense. Look at the rand. The rand is reacting to the nonsense that is happening. But it's probably just a bunch of guys. Of course, I'm simplifying it. I'm simplifying more than it's, of course, much more complex than I'm putting it now. But it's a bunch of guys that have decided that, no, we don't like that. And therefore, that which we can, with the mechanisms that we can, we are going to tilt the balance of forces in economic instruments this way, so as to give a certain perception of what is the reality.
Exactly. And that is why people shouldn't be allowed to be like billionaires. Because if you're on that level, the amount of sway that you have
on the market,
but not on the market, on the thinking of people.
Yes.
That's if you're not responsible with that, it's kind of scary what they can do.
And what is responsibility for a businessman?
Profits.
A responsible businessman must be profitable.
Yeah.
You'd be irresponsible if you're a businessman and you work against making profits.
Yes.
And what happens on the day where your profits will be at the expense of justice?
You're not there to.
You still
you're
have
not a
to
man.
be responsible.
Exactly. You're not a man of justice.
Yes.
You're a man of profit.
Yes, you're a man of profit.
Yeah.
What happens when, as true or as sound as some of the ideas of the EFF might make sense, what happens when they come into power? What does that mean for you who had been doing business through ESCOM with the government for the last 50 years? You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Though, so these are the things that this side, which is good, I really believe that is what is compromising them.
Sorry, what do you mean by if EFF comes into power? What happens with ESCOM?
For instance, I have been a supplier
Yes.
to ESCOM for coal for the past 50 years. I'm making an example.
Yeah.
From apartheid into the democratic dispensation. And the EFF, it's almost monopolization if you think about it.
Yeah, I'm the main. I'm the one who gives coal.
And the EFF is saying, no. We want our view of the economy is socialist in nature. And
so we take
the first place is we are not going to start with Discovery, because Discovery is privately owned. We're not going to start with Vodacom. We are going to start with state-owned enterprises. ESCOM is owned by the state, and therefore it should benefit the majority of people more than it would some individuals. So what we are going to do is our economic policy would that the supplying
I get what you're saying.
It must now, in a way that would favor, let's say, whether you're going to create some sort of whatever platform you use to create, so that upcoming black businessmen are able to supply ESCOM with coal.
Yeah.
As opposed to
hopefully with solar energy.
Yeah.
I've got a friend. He believes he's going to become a millionaire with his solar.
That would be absolutely. I mean, those are some of the things that should encourage us. Really,
it really does.
Moving into the future. So when that happens, you take because it's been used. I'll take a Rupert for instance. Let's say he's been that supplier. Rupert is going to do, because he's a man in business.
Yeah.
He's not about to lose whatever 500 billion he was making a year, whatever he was making, X billion rands. He's not going to lose that because a good idea has come. So with the influence that he has to. If it means when those guys come into power, I've always figured and thought to myself, and I'm sure if the EFF would ever take power,
they would
in
be
2
bought
months,
out so quick.
The rand to the dollar would probably be sitting at $30 and would probably be paying probably bloody another $30 for a liter of petrol.
Yeah.
Is it because they're bad leaders that there's been that escalation? When Zuma brought in Brian Molefe, which I was completely against, and still completely against now, was it because Brian Molefe would have made a bad Minister of Finance?
See, I don't know these people enough.
Or was it because... So
it was more the uncertainty that he introduced.
You understand? So that that time, a few years back, he
I remember those reshufflings.
Yes, and then you hundreds of billions overnight.
Yes.
This is simplistic and probably sounds a little bit ignorant. But I've thought, these markets, these so-called markets, how do they know? Or how do they see? Who are the eyes of these markets? These markets that are able to dictate to us who would make a good leader, who would make a bad leader. Where does the intelligence of these markets come from?
Yeah.
And then, of course, ultimately, it's individuals somewhere crunching numbers. It's individuals who have... You look at rating agencies. If rating agencies are absolutely clinical in their approach to rate and to say this is the state, or this is this is where we are rating this organization or this country, why would two leading rating agencies
have different ratings,
derive at different ratings?
Yeah. It's like those sort of things. It's not near as clear cut.
You see,
it's not a clinical process.
It means someone.
There's so many connections in between. It's impossible for them to come in and take account of all of that.
You understand?
They try to the best of their abilities, but I don't think it's. In the end, you've got humans.
I
don't know whether you saw the article of that woman who wanted to sell her house in I think it's in the US or the UK.
Yeah.
So she wanted to sell her house and she got a valuation for it. And it got valued for the same price she bought it, like let's say 5-6 years ago. So all she did was she took off all the pictures that she had in the house. Because it's a black lady. Took off all the pictures that she had. Got another person in or she got one of her white friends to pretend that she's the owner of the house. Got another guy in to value the house. Increased by, I think, let's say like 40% increase in the valuation of the house price.
Look at that. A human element is involved.
Yes, exactly.
And this is, what we are dealing with. So you've got those things, and I suppose you've got, which is I think was groundbreaking, speaking of things that really encourage me, the new powers to the Auditor General that allow them to be able to retrieve funds and to hold public officials directly and personally liable.
Oh, by name, basically.
Yeah, so if you were the CFO or if you're the municipal manager of whatever, and we lost 300 million, we're giving you this time to retrieve that fund. If you're not able to, that you are personally liable for that.
Yes.
Now, that was never the case. The Auditor General went around the country saying, no, here you squandered 300 million, here you squandered 500 million, here you squandered this. But am I still connected? I think I hit the cable.
Yeah, no, I can still hear you.
All right. And there's nothing the Auditor General could do about that. So now the Auditor General can retrieve those funds. I think that's going to change the face of public service.
Yes.
Maybe not because I think it was a year or two ago that it came into effect, and it's coming. It's coming. So
I think people are very impatient with change.
Yes.
They think we're changing something now, and then they look a year later and they're like, why is the system not changed yet?
Understandably, when you've been in poverty for all your life, or as long as you can remember.
Yeah.
And the problem is that the promises start now. They don't start when we are closer to effecting the change to its fullest extent. They start when there's no prospect of change and the promises come that we are going to build you a house, we are going to build you roads, we are going to give you jobs, we are going to get rid of corruption.
And we've got no idea how much of that we can actually... when we're making those promises,
we don't know we're going to get rid of corruption. The mechanisms are not in place. We started promising people years ago that we're going to get rid of corruption. It will only be 2 years ago that the new Auditor General, the new powers of the Auditor General will come to effect. Which I think are absolutely groundbreaking for me, because it means now when Asive sits there and is trying to do his dealings, when the Auditor General comes, Asive knows that he will in fact be personally held liable for whatever it gets lost from those coffers. Then you have the new the Constitutional Court ruling a few months ago that ruled that individuals can now run for public office. They can run for president. Yanni can wake up
A random guy can stand up
and stand up and put his hand up and I want to be president of the country without becoming a member of any political party. You do not need to go to some congress and say, no, this is our presidential candidate, blah, blah, blah. No,
I don't know whether you know, but in the old days in Greece, the original democracy was a random draw.
Oh, yeah.
So how it used to work is you would basically get your, like, jury duty, you would get your call up, and they would say, okay, you now, for the next year, you're going to be one of the politicians running
yes.
And then and they said that from their perspective, that was the only way to keep balance in the hands of the people.
Yes.
So I mean, so random guy can now put his hand up and say,
put his hand up. Do I think those guys are going to win? Not in the next 10 to 15 years.
It's like the I always laughed at the what are they called? The Afrikaner people who stood for like SRC positions with their posters.
Yeah.
And I was like, guys, what do you think your odds are? Like
in action.
Why would you? It's AfriForum. Why would you stand there under AfriForum banners
with an AfriForum logo on you and think that you have prospects?
If you want to get into the political game, that's your number one political mistake.
Absolutely, But it's going to force political organizations because now it then says that society is no longer necessarily interested in parties, they're interested in individuals. We saw it in 2019.
Ideas.
Yeah, no, absolutely ideas.
Yeah.
The ideas that those people bring. We saw it in 2019. The NC, I don't think the NC would have made more than 50% in the general elections in 2019 had it not been for what people perceived Ramaphosa to have been President Ramaphosa to have been bringing.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of them voted for the man more than they voted for the ANC.
That is true.
Some of them people would have never otherwise voted for the ANC, voted that election for the ANC because of the man. Of course, and the ideas that they believe the man holds. Now, that will then force, and it is now forcing organization to field the best people possible. So you're not just going to field Asive because Asive must have a track record and must be known in society that this man, we know him, we know what he stands for, we've seen him, we can attest, and this is the man whom we believe can lead us. That is very encouraging. That is absolutely encouraging.
Yeah.
Because it means one day the parties are going to go and say, hey, Yanni, we would like you to become the presidential candidate of the ANC, of the DA, because you have a track record amongst the people. I really believe we are moving towards there.
I mean, I think that has been the case, but I do agree with you in the fact that people are voting more for the individual idea or like my flatmates and I discussed this concept and apparently that's the way it is in Switzerland. They have multiple elections throughout the year. So you don't necessarily have to elect. So I'm not sure how it works in terms of a governing party, but now a new issue comes up, suppose the state budget, and now people need to vote like, are we spending this extra?
Or they vote for issues.
They vote on issues.
Yes.
It's a very difficult...
It's a difficult thing to manage, and it would have to be hinged on the backs of... Look at during the conversation of Brexit.
Yeah.
The journalist would go randomly on the street in the marketplace. What do you think on Brexit? 80% of the comments I heard were well-informed and well-articulated comments. And that said to me, the citizens are aware of what is happening. Look at the elections in America. You listen to those citizens, ordinary citizens. Of course, in America, you also get a lot of ignorant citizens. But even in their ignorance, that which they know about their ignorance, even that, they know what they are talking about. As conservative as it is, listen, they know what they are talking about.
Yeah.
As liberal as it is, they know what they are talking about. Now, and you can do that in Switzerland, but when you come to South Africa, really no one, up until COVID, no one even cared about budgets, what was a budget and what impact it had on who and who. Really, they could not care.
Why do you think COVID
what were the
impacted
procurement? What were the procurement processes of government? They never knew or cared about that.
It was COVID. You're right. COVID exposed a lot of these things.
So now COVID, people are sitting there like, hey, what? One, genders do not have this superficial stories they're always running. They could actually start some running some stuff that were there. And people began to know of these things. So up until you have a largely more literate electorate, you can move to much more complex and much more, complex systems of democracy and government.
Yes.
But now you need even this. I mean, it's probably almost a year now, I don't know, since the Constitutional Court said, come up with a law on how individuals are going to be. We have not been able, it's difficult. No one knows as yet how that's going to work. Are you going to be? Because before, we voted for a party. The party gave us their candidate. They won seats in parliament. They did not win seats for union buildings. They won seats for Cape Town in parliament. Then he said, this is our presidential candidate, and they put them before parliament.
Okay.
And then members of parliament actually elect the president of South Africa. It's not ordinary citizens. We voted for a party that had representation in parliament, and in parliament members
votes.
of parliament voted.
I see. I didn't even know that's how it works.
Yeah, that's how it works in South Africa.
Yeah.
So we're giving you a face, that this is the face, our face, the person whom we are going to. And these are the ideas, what we are going to do. Vote for us. We vote. With next to Ramaphosa's face, we put a cross. But once the NC wins there, Ramaphosa is not the president, nor is even the president-elect. We say the president-elect, but according to our constitution, we've won so many seats in parliament. We then go to parliament, this is our president, then parliament votes, and then the man becomes president. Now, do you see it was through a party system, but now what's going to happen with an individual? Are they going to get proportional representation through vote?
I mean, technically, I suppose if that individual impresses... So those members of parliament, right? They're voting now for president.
Yes.
But can they vote on their own...
They can vote on their own conscience, technically.
Yes.
But politically, they can't.
Yes.
So this is the conversation that is currently happening even in the Zondo Commission, to say there are people that voted things that they felt that these things were wrong, even the impeachment of Zuma, blah, blah, and all of that. They felt that these things were wrong, but they did not have a choice because this was the party line. The MC said, this is the line.
Yes, it's a very difficult
so when we put our candidate there, you don't really have an option.
Yes, exactly. It makes sense that because the people that voted for you put you there to vote for
that's the mandate that they gave you to deliver this person to
the
us.
mandate.
Yeah.
So whether you want to or not.
Yes.
But that's a very difficult line with some others. I mean, it's a simple one when you're voting for the president, but it becomes difficult for some other issues.
Yes, absolutely. And what are we going to do when individual people want to run? Are they going to be voting in parliament?
Yeah, no, I mean...
You get what I'm saying?
It feels a bit like
win their vote outside parliament? And then if so, what is going to be the role of parliament in electing the president as the constitution dictates?
You mentioned earlier that in order for us to reach these higher levels of democracy and governance, we need a more educated, voter base, essentially. Yes. I mean, I'd argue, if I want to play devil's advocate here, I'd argue that then there's no incentive for your governing party, if they believe that they can remain in power with the current state of things, to prioritize education. What do you think?
I think that would be an inclination for some to go towards that route, or at least to think like that. But funny enough, one of the things that have come into the spotlight and that have been definitive factors of what constitutes a failing government or a succeeding government is education.
Yeah.
So one of the things that the society is now becoming increasingly aware of is the standard of education that they deserve. And one of the indictments against the ANC government has been the state of education.
Yeah.
So even if that inclination arose, I don't think...
You think that the opposing force is strong enough to defeat that?
It would be self-defeating, to try and do that. So the chances of leading, of retaining power through dumbing down education are much more less than the chances of retaining power through
educating, creating a loyal voter base
and a very good education system. So, in fact, by the way, which is very interesting, I think, I don't have the numbers on this. Someone smart should do the numbers. I think they would be interesting. I think that as huge, a significant part of the education of our society on issues has been through social media.
Yeah.
It's things they have seen and they have learned and they've interacted through and with on social media that have gone on to inform what they now know.
Yeah.
So
someone sharing something there, or
yes.
I think my poor social media algorithm is so confused with who I am, because I really like sometimes watching the views of like very conservative friends, just to get a perspective of like what they think like, and then I look at that and I think Facebook must think like, and then I see they push their like, because then I realize they push some of their other like news on me as well, and I'm like, no, I just wanted to see this specific person's view. Don't think this is who I am on Facebook. Like, please don't do this to me.
So I think with that, and one of the beauties with social media, the guys are trying to develop now algorithms, as you say, that are able to shape. We've seen happening a lot in the States, trying to shape the minds and shape what people know to be the truth. But the beauty and the advantages of social media currently, I don't know if it will change, because I mean, none of us 10 years thought we'd be where we are with social media.
Yeah.
But the beauty with what it currently is now is that what we know is informed by the people whom we choose to associate with, not even at a personal level or at a direct level, but even indirectly.
Yes.
So we if I am more inclined towards the views of someone like Malema, it's what he shares and the people that he follows that I will begin to follow, and the people that I will begin, that a particular narrative, I begin to appreciate a particular narrative, such that it cannot be monopolized by the tech company, or by the So those are the advantages of education. And so I think also the approach, or when we speak of educating our electorate, it must not necessarily be through mainstream education, the curriculum. It's also the responsibility of media, of the media. Of course, I've already said I really don't think can really ever have objective media, but I think we need to diversify media platforms and media outlets.
I think it is, to a large extent, it has been happening.
Yes, no, it has. It really has. So it's in diversifying those that we are then going to be able to have a more balanced and a more...
But you know what the problem is, Asive? You can balance those media sources, but as long as that Facebook algorithm just pushes one source of news onto you, because it knows that's what you're going to click on, and it knows what's going to get the advertisers.
Absolutely.
You're not going to see any other views.
Absolutely.
So that's why you need to actively go out and look for opposing views. Like, think about something you hold strongly, and then look for evidence of the opposite, because else you won't.
No, that is absolutely true. But in all of that, and with all of those contradictions, but I think we will eventually arrive at a thinking and a more educated society. And that is what, maybe never say educated, but say informed society.
Yeah.
And that is what we need. We need it. It's absolutely crucial. And I do not for one second believe that it's not going to come with its own drawbacks and
different struggles there.
Yes, different struggles that are going to come with it. Because one of the things that I foresee, which I sometimes am a little bit concerned about, which sometimes makes me think maybe I'm a conservative, is that we might get to a place in a world where if it's accessible, it's permissible, or that anything is permissible.
Yeah.
Once again, I don't know. Is it a formidable threat, or am I just a conservative?
But what's your fears into? What do you mean will be accessible, but that shouldn't be?
You see, I fear a society where everything goes.
We just leave because we so much for your personal freedoms and liberation.
Yes, everything goes. Anyone can say anything at any time about anything at any time.
Yeah.
The truth is what we say to be the truth.
That's why you always need a counterweight.
So I do fear that. I really do fear that, and hence I'm saying maybe it's because I'm a maybe
there's a little
bit of conservatism in me.
Yeah.
So that is probably not the only, but one of the perceived drawbacks that I think that we would have to deal. I don't know how we'd have to deal. I saw it now during COVID, and I said, hey, we are going to get a place where, even in the advent of AI, man, the realm of reality changes.
Yeah.
The realm of reality and truth. And it's now going to be at the behest and at the disposal of an individual.
Of what is reality?
Of what is reality to them. That's a little bit scary.
Yeah, it's terrifying. It is terrifying.
You understand what I'm saying? Because then I'm struggling to see how we're going to get order.
How all of these structures will be.
Yes. How
do you think we're gonna?
How are they going to interact?
You know how you just said you saw this shift in the ANC's core and structure over the last couple of years.
Yes.
Don't you think we're currently running a very capitalist system?
Yes.
But the minute you can reach this sort of point where you, as you say, the individual is in control of their reality, do you think that system is still a sustainable?
A system where the individual...
No, will a capitalist system still favor the ability for an individual to dictate their own reality? I mean, if I can live whatever life I want to,
yes,
why would the capitalist virtues appeal to me? Or do you think those virtues are so ingrained in human nature that it will continue forever?
The capitalist virtue will always, for now, in today, so I use always with limitation of as far as I can see for now, will always endure. Because I believe that the world is built around the whole capitalist system.
Yeah.
Let me give you an example. I gave you, in fact, now one with the appointment of Brian Molefe by Jacob Zuma as the finance minister. All decisions, unfortunately, have to culminate. Our tie with capitalism, that is probably an unbreakable bond, is economics. Is economics because economics, they not necessarily have to be capitalist in nature. It is our perspective, but the current instruments of economics that we use, for as long as they are there, you can't, even as an individual,
can't separate yourself
you can't separate. You can't identify yourself outside that, because the question is, you see, you've got to buy bread, and the price of bread would be informed by many things, one of which will be fuel over time, or inflation over time. Inflation or prices and all of those things, they're unfortunately informed by human decisions, or how can I put it? It's informed, in fact, by the capitalist system itself.
As rules.
Is rules. So
but those rules are also all over the interconnectedness of the whole. You can't predict
yes,
where
you
it's
can.
going to go.
You see, let's take for instance, take media, which you've already spoken of. Let's take human rights.
Yeah.
If human rights are so clear cut that these are human rights, this is a violation of human rights. You mentioned Israel and Palestine.
My mind just went there again, yeah.
Why are we struggling to reconcile what are human rights violations? If indeed human rights, if human rights are because human rights is a huge currency in the world.
Yeah.
The concept of human rights and democracy. It is the same currency that has justified invasions by other countries in other countries. The same currency that has justified disinvestments. The same currency that has informed sanctions. That has informed civil wars. That has the perception of human rights. It is based on human rights that a country can say we're invading that country whether they like or not because we believe that human rights are being violated.
And we're going to decide for those people.
We are going to decide for them because we say that the human rights are being violated. And the world will look on and probably even cheer because they will be the currency, they have enough currency. So human rights is not some... It's a huge currency in the world that we are living in.
It's
now.
the first cryptocurrency.
You understand?
Yeah.
We really could say that.
Yes.
So when you look at that, you see that, no man, if this thing is dry cut and it has nothing to do with politics or capitalism or whatever, why its application is inconsistent? So it's informed by capitalism itself. So meaning it is possible that as a president of a country, I can make a certain decision that I honestly believe that it is in the interest of my citizens.
Yeah.
But if my decision is inconsistent with the ideals of capitalism, somehow, somewhere, I will find myself in contravention of human rights.
Yeah. I mean, I'd almost want to say at some point prior to this, that was religion. Was that currency.
Yeah, religion. Was and still is.
Yeah, but to a lesser degree now.
Lesser degree, absolutely, than it was in the past.
So it's slowly being replaced by the new...
of human rights.
Capitalist and human rights.
And who comes up with these human rights? Let's say human rights indeed are what we are made to believe they are. The world agrees that as far as Africa is concerned, no constitution comes close to that of South Africa.
Yeah.
The world agrees at large. The world goes on to agree that when it comes to the entire world, the South African constitution is one of the most progressive constitutions. The constitution should inform the state, should inform everything about the country. Why would you, in a country that has one of the best constitutions, inverted commas, have the constitutional struggles and that you are having and the problems that you are having now?
Yeah.
So I don't think we will ever, it's possible, no matter how much people want to identify themselves outside the capitalist system, they will be ever able to break away from the clutches of capital, at least as the world is. I actually think, I could be wrong, that it probably would take something almost like another world war to dent, depending on who is going to move first during and post that world war. If it would be a character of socialism and the uniting of nations and leaders around the ideals of socialism. During and after that war, we would begin to, probably after that war, but during that war, but after that war, I believe capitalism would be dented.
But other than that, there's nothing that could make a...
Personally.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, listen, something does not get as dangerous as this. Everything about the structure of this beast, every organ, everything that makes the heart beat, that sends the blood here, that sends everything about the system is working towards a capitalist outcome. Absolutely everything.
Yeah.
There is nothing about the United Nations that is not working towards a capitalist outcome. There is nothing about NATO.
I mean, that's a trade agreement, so that's very that's very much capitalist.
No, it's the NATO is the what you call this, the hired gun of the UN, the kill machine of the UN that decides that no, we're sick and tired of what is happening. They were going to send forces. A group of countries come together, bring their armies together, and they go and invade. Empowered by the United Nations. You go into a sovereign country like Libya and you kill a leader of Libya.
On the basis of human rights.
On the basis of human rights. That human rights that are contested there is not an overwhelming understanding in that country that our rights are being violated.
Yeah.
It is an external understanding that is not the standard or the barometer for what is human rights.
But where do we draw the line now? Because, for example, I saw a few weeks ago, I think it was in Russia, where Putin signed in law, or he abolished gay marriage, for example.
Yes.
Now, your immediate reaction is like, surely that's not possible. And then you think, and then my flatmate and I had this conversation, and we were like, well, if the Russian people decide that is what we want, like, is it a human right to be able to be gay and get married? Like,
it's a question of sovereignty.
Exactly, but it's a very difficult conversation to have.
It's a question of sovereignty.
Yeah.
You can bring that to this scale. There are white and black alike people who frown, seriously disapprove of people whom they perceive to be poor having more than one or two children. Like, you're poor, why would you have 4 children?
Yeah.
But when you get to that community where people can have 4, 5, 6, 7 children, it's their way of life. They could not be more content in their way of life. Are they struggling from time to time with food? They do. Given the opportunity to take contraceptives or they would make another child. Then it works for them.
And who are you to say?
You can believe that is a human right issue, because you can say, but you are, by you doing so, you are exposing, or you are creating poor people, or you are not going to be able to feed these children, and it's a human rights violation for people not to eat. If for the people of Russia, if they frown upon homosexuality, the people of Russia, I think the people of Russia must be allowed to decide. You know why? Because when we get to we will never get to a point where we agree completely on what are our ideals as a people of the world.
Yeah. But now the people of Russia can decide we agree or don't agree with homosexuality. Now, what takes away then from a different country deciding we don't agree with the existence of... Where's that line? I'm taking this to the other extreme now. I'm going to like genocide. Deciding we as a country do not want this other nation within our borders. We the people in power. We're gonna we the majority. We're gonna kill 10 million.
I suppose it's difficult. It's probably not as easy as that, because really, if the people believe, as the Israelites would believe, that it is our constitutional and our birthright to kill these people, even it has happened in other countries in Africa.
Do we still leave them up
Do
to
we
their
still leave them
sovereign-
up to their sovereign standards, to their sovereign nation? Hey, bro, I don't know. It's difficult.
Yes.
I don't know. It's difficult because if all nations were equal and the systems and the tools that govern nations or that brought nations together were objective, I would say let everyone have a right to comment on their neighbor's affairs.
Yeah.
Because if nation A decides to have sinister intentions on nation B and disguise their invasion as a humanitarian project or endeavor or whatever, the nation B has enough capacity to defend their sovereignty.
But the problem is the balance of power is
The
not.
balance of power is skewed.
Yes.
The second thing, that which we think we agree to be the ideals that bind us as the world, do not favor or do not take into account. They are not consistent.
Yeah.
Take some of the committees that are in the UN. The Economic Committee. Take NATO, for instance. I think NATO, I could be wrong, I think it has about 8 member states or whatever. And NATO can go into any UN member state. 8 countries.
But who's going to
Decide
stop?
the
but
fate.
who's going to stop them?
And you are a member state of the UN. And they will come in, and there's no one and nothing that can do anything.
Yeah. Nice.
And of that 8, by the way, I think except for, I could be wrong in terms of the actual number, but the principle I'm most certain of. If there's 8, I think about 7 or 6 are permanent member states of the NATO.
Okay.
Permanent.
Yeah. I think I've heard of this somewhere.
Permanent member states.
Yeah. So nothing nothing can get them out of there.
Nothing can get them out of there. So
But it's permanent in inverted commas, basically, because if something, as you said, like if we have another world war now.
This is why I'm saying all of these systems, because it's part of the systems that I'm speaking about.
Yeah.
I think only would be dealt with through
A war.
a world war.
Yeah.
I would have said.
But we're moving towards a place of peace there.
We're moving towards a place of peace. The tolerance for violence is fast dissipating.
So do you think that is one of the successes of the system? Is this peacefulness that we're experiencing, and do you think it's like sustainable in the way that the movement has been happening? Because they're taking away, they're giving a bit, and this whole system is dictating everything. But do you think it's a move in the direction that we want to be moving in?
I think as a world we're moving in a fairly acceptable direction. It's just that it is so complex. It is the world is such a complex place, and the competing interests are vary so much. I don't think we'll ever be able to reach equilibrium.
Yeah.
And I suppose the best state of would be equilibrium, state of equilibrium. So, I mean, until and it's that state that I'm speaking about, where all countries are somewhat have equal power and they have equal standing in what brings us together as the world. Then maybe, perhaps, we would, because now what is as I'm saying, what is going to stop countries that are more powerful than going and dictating for economic interests? Absolutely nothing to do with human rights. For economic interests, going and dictating in a particular country. So, I think it's very difficult, man. It's very difficult. Maybe the problem lies not in the acts of these countries, but in what binds us together as the world, in fixing those things. Because I think maybe the acts are secondary, because they know they're empowered by these unfair or imbalanced mechanisms that bind us together as a country.
So maybe, I mean, sometimes I think the only thing that could unite us is like if you discovered aliens are trying to invade us, and that now we as humans need to like rally against this external force, because for long enough we had an other on earth, but if we could become the us, and we could make a them out of a whole different people, that might be.
And we would say the brutality of the capitalist system is, let's imagine they land and they at the Karoo somewhere in Namibia or whatever. Who do we send as the first line to go attack?
Yeah.
Let's imagine we eventually win that war against those aliens. Based on the economics of that war, the post-war era and the power dynamics will be informed by the politics of that war.
Yes.
And the politics of that war are and will be informed by the current structuring of the world.
So you think it'll just be back to business after
I think it'll be back to business. You see, the nice thing with it's like civil wars. Okay, I retract that. There's absolutely nothing nice about any war. But one of the things that can arise from a devastating war is that everyone goes back to square one. And the things that which we all agreed were wrong. If I knew I had 10 millis and you had 1, after the Civil War, you have 0, I have 0. It's not that I did not know that I had 10, you had 1. I knew, but I could not give it. But because we do no longer have it, we can build with 1, 1.
Yeah.
2, 2, 3.
But I mean, I think people are now at a point where they realize the better situation is just for me to give you 5, or for you to give me 5 millis. Do you think people are so selfish?
Nah, it's not possible. If that was possible, we would have dealt with food insecurity in institutions of higher learning.
Yeah.
I'm not talking of fees. Fees, that's another beast on its own. Millions, hundreds of millions of it. It's just food. Food. Take an average class, take an average residence, take an average institution. The haves, without a dent, can feed the have-nots.
Yeah. Definitely.
Without denting themselves. So, if it's happening, it's happening in very isolated incidents. It's either it's very isolated or it's just not happening. Because I don't think we would be where we are if the haves were willingly giving.
Yeah.
And the other thing that becomes a problem there is who determines
who should give and who should give how
what
much.
should be given.
Yeah.
When we were having the the conversation about whether should SER remain or leave, I was one of the people that said SER must go in its current format, and the current format as it had been sponsored and whatever by Atikafia. And I said firstly, just the way it's set up, and I've always believed anything set up an era before the current era is not for that era, because there are ideals, understandings, there are a whole range of circumstances that led to that which was made to be like that.
Yeah.
So unless you are telling me that the world has remained stagnant across transcending eras, the fact that we're in a separate era means values, everything has changed. Well, not everything, but a lot has changed.
Yeah.
And therefore there's a need for that to be relooked at.
Yeah.
So that it can meet the demands of the current era. So, yeah,
And I mean, our site is sponsored by McDonald's, which is a more apt. I couldn't find a better metaphor for that update from Otikafia up into
to McDonald's.
to McDonald's.
To
Yeah.
McDonald's. I mean, this sounds silly, but we all eat McDonald's.
Exactly.
And everyone, and the first, the first responsibility they have was a McDonald's jingle.
Yeah.
How do you work around them? Which we all know. Love or hate, but no.
Yes.
Can relate to.
Exactly.
So, you know, it goes back to that for me.
Constant improvement.
Yes.
Changing.
You see. So, yeah, I mean, but I think the world is just a very complex place.
Yeah, and I mean, we covered a lot of its problems and its topics tonight.
Yes.
I think, it might be time for us to end the chat.
Yes.
But thank you very much for coming through for the conversation.
No, thank you so much, man. And I think as a parting shot, if someone would listen and think, yes, it sounds I'm more disappointed or more discouraged than I was before this. I think the solution is in small societies and small communities.
Yeah.
Not that they isolate themselves, but in your community, what are your values? Make them work and serve and protect the human. At a broad level, we can all agree what are human rights. This is why we can state a charter and say, now this is why 90% of countries can sign one charter without wavering, because we can agree largely. So I don't think we, as humans, we differ that much on what we believe is good. I just think we're selfish.
On what we want for our kids.
Yes, I just think we're selfish. I just want it for me and my kids alone.
Yeah.
But I know it's the right thing and not necessarily for your kids.
Yeah.
But so I think it's not difficult to find them for smaller societies. Find what makes your society work and protect the human rights of the people in your society. And it's small societies upholding the human rights and fighting for each other, not fighting against people, but fighting for each other to make each other better.
Yeah.
In the South Africa, it's building local economies.
Yeah.
We're not going to have, I don't think we'll ever have an inclusive economy as we think we will. This broadly inclusive economy that everyone participates directly at the spine of this economy. I don't think it's possible.
No, I don't think so either.
So it's local economies, societies like that. This which you speak of the haves, in fact, I'm probably thinking now, as I'm speaking, when I'm bringing down into societies, that you were right and I was wrong. I think you're right, the giving, the haves that give, because I just remembered where I come from, in the small societies. From the time, many years back, people's plots were not the same. And people's capacities were not the same to produce to produce things, whatever, for a living.
Feed for themselves.
Yes, but no one ever went hungry. Absolutely no one. Absolutely no one. But I think it might have been easier at smaller scales.
Yeah.
So if we're all able to do that, as kumbaya as it sounds, but I think it's the most obvious and it's not easy, but easy in inverted commas, the easiest approach that we have to
solving this.
Yes, to having a better world than we have at this point. We're seeing it happening in Lesotho in some areas. Lesotho is largely doing very bad. But the people have lost all hope in government. So it's small communities that clean their own communities. They clean their own communities. Whatever needs to be done, they do it for themselves.
Yeah.
If government does anything, it's a bonus for them, for some of those communities. So I'm not saying we must give up on government, but I'm saying in fact, the government approach should be on building
these small communities
and societies with their own economies. And in no way am I saying build Oranias.
I wanted to say we've got Asive Dlanjwa on the podcast endorsing Orania. So.
Yes, no way am I saying let's build Oranias. We don't want independent states. Yes, inclusive.
Yeah.
Yes, and I really believe that in the triumph of the human spirit, we will find at local communities, we will find equilibrium in our values. I really believe that.
I mean, this whole model of yours depends on one thing, and that's what you just pointed out. It's this human spirit of like caring and the goodness of the human spirit.
Yes,
and I choose to believe in that because I can't afford not to be honest.
And if I want to, it's there. I want to tell you it's there for the same reason that they say they give you a trigger warning when there's a gruesome something on the.
Yeah.
It's because there is something that unifies us, I believe, as the human spirit. We have a certain view even of suffering. We have people inflicting suffering on people, but the same cringe you get when I get when someone, a real video now, not movies, when we see a video of someone being slashed on the head or whatever, the 99% I will put my head on the block will cringe, whether they're going to be angry or what, but it's not a normal feeling. It's not, and I think that for me is evidence of this human spirit and the human goodness that binds all of us. So I'm hopeful, and I would leave that. I would say that is my parting shot.
That's a very beautiful parting shot to end off with.
No, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Cool. Absolutely appreciate it.